Welcome, everyone. Today we are exploring how investing in health pays back in Canada. And we are honored to have our lead in Canada speak to us a little bit more today about how investing in health, particularly in Canada, has paid back in the region. I'd like to ask my guest to introduce herself and tell me a little bit about the incredible work that's happening in Canada. So over to you, Olesy.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited for us to be sharing and recording around the world on what's going on in different parts of the world, how well is really supporting our clients, our tenants, our consultants, our enterprise providers, everybody that works in the well ecosystem and is touched by the well ecosystem globally. And really excited to share what's been going on in Canada, things that are progressing in Canada, and just the well movement in general today. So again, Olesy Alekseev, I'm the Canada country lead at the International Well Building Institute, based in beautiful Toronto. And I'm really excited to share some key insights in the market. Currently today, Canada has seen tremendous growth in the last, I would say, 4 to 5 years as it relates to well. We have now over 4,500 different locations that have registered, enrolled, or pursuing one of our well solutions. And that's huge. If we're looking at overall numbers, we're probably close to 220 million square feet of enrolled spaces in Canada, which is so exciting. We just celebrated our 6 billion square feet of space globally that have been enrolled. So that represents about 4.5% of the global market, which is really, really exciting. And I think the other thing that I'm really proud of in terms of what we've seen in Canada is some really big firsts. We've had some first projects that have really made it onto the global stage. For example, Yorkdale Shopping Mall, which is one of the Oxford properties, was the first mall in the world to achieve the well performance rating. I mean, how exciting is that? We've seen some first in terms of the TD Towers that are part of Cadillac Fairview. Their 6 towers are well gold certified, over 4 million square feet of space for that specific project, making that one of the largest North American towers and offices to be well gold certified. So a lot to be proud of. And I know, Whitney, you're a witness of this because 10 years ago, when you started with the organization, I think Canada was one of the first leaders and champions to actually pursue well V1. So again, I'm just excited to carry on this legacy. I am really grateful to be able to lead well in Canada and, to have this conversation today.
Thank you, Olesy. So, I want to speak specifically about what makes Canada unique. And you have a system, really, even when we look at the insurance system around health, your longevity rates, and this understanding of taking care of each other, and that transcends into the workplace. And that sort of community-based sense that we work hard together, but we take care of each other, and our health and well-being matters is so at the forefront of the commitment that I've seen across Canada. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how people understand their health in buildings. So when you first started this work in Canada, what was people's understanding? Did you feel like people understood the air and water quality issues? Do you feel like some of our work in healthy food and community was new to Canada? And where do you think we are today? How do people that you speak to that are your clients, how do they understand the issues around the well building standard around health in buildings? And why does it matter to them in Canada?
Yeah, it's a great question, a really great segue in terms of where we are. I think Canada as a country in general, historically, has always been very focused on sustainability. I think in general, as Canadians, whether that's part of our culture, whether because we're the largest country in the world that has a wealth of resources, if we're looking at our lumber, if we're looking at our resources generally across our geography, sustainability and connection to nature and taking care of nature in Canada has always been at the forefront of our history and everything that we do. So I think naturally it's being just part of our fibers as a country, as a nation, as a culture to be able to take care of the land that we live on and really care about our resources. In general, Canadians love their outdoors, right? So, we do a lot of outdoor activities, which kind of leads to us being at the forefront of some of the environmental movements that we've seen that have come out of Canada. So I think that's an interesting history. Now, for sure, I think there's a big shift that happened as COVID hit, right? Even though we were already talking about health, well-being, air quality, right? All of those things that matter, movement, nutrition, I think COVID really brought everything to the forefront in a way that we haven't seen before, where it was a nice to have, it was something that we've talked about, but it wasn't something that was a must have and needed to be in place. And I think that is something that's unique. And it just already kind of solidified the things that Canadian and Canada stood for as it related to health and well-being, but propelling that forward in like a really fast way to now zoom in and be laser focused on that, given that we had some of the longest lockdowns of COVID in any other country in the world. I think health, well-being, mental health, how we're taking care of ourselves, our neighbors, our bodies, all of these things just became very, very important. There's a recent study that was done and a report actually that came out from the Boston Consulting Group. And unfortunately, I think health and well-being has become a focus pillar for Canadians. 25% of Canadians in this report reported to have a mental health crisis, right? 25%. That's really scary. We've seen that and we saw that just because of the isolations and the long periods of isolations that we had in Canada during COVID. And I think that has really escalated a lot of companies, a lot of organizations, a lot of corporations to really get behind health and well-being. It's no longer like a nice to have and something that, we're kind of thinking about. Maybe there's a small budget. It's actually critical. It is critical to our country. It is critical to our survival, and it is critical to retention, to ensuring that we thrive as a nation and as a country. And that's really where I've seen the movement. Just given a little bit of the last 5 years and what's happened, the really big focus on investing from all different areas, whether it's government, whether it's corporate, whether it's the non-for-profit sector, into health and well-being. And that's really, and it continues to grow. Like I don't see a slowdown. Even when we look at global trends, right now, based on the latest trends, the health and well-being sector is contributing to about 70.6, $70.1 billion. And it's projected to be at, over 130 billion by 2033. So that's a 6% CAGR growth. Like that's phenomenal. And, we don't see a slowdown. And I think there's a bigger integration again, because we have a system, a healthcare system, unlike in the US, that is funded by our government, which we're very, very fortunate, but we've also seen a breakdown of our healthcare system because of the strains of COVID that it had, right? Because we only had a limited number of hospital beds. We only had a limited number of doctors to be able to deal with the COVID crisis. And so we really do need to think of different ways of how we bring health, well-being, resilience, and giving tools to our employees and in general and to the public on how to manage our health and well-being.
So let's talk about buildings as a solution to the health crisis. So there's three particular issues I want to talk to you about. The first is post-COVID that you discussed, the mental health crisis. The second is the response to wildfire smoke, which of course impacted not just Canada, but of course countries around because of the wind flow. And the third is return to office.
Mm-hmm.
So for many people listening, they've experienced all three of these things, and they don't necessarily think that buildings are the solution to it. and are not aware that they spend 90% of their time indoors. They spend 90,000 hours of their life at work. And
Mhm.
so, Alessi, you work with the leading real estate developers, leading institutions in Canada and companies. And
Mhm.
so many people feel like it's going to be their doctor that solves their health issues, right? Or it's whether or not they go to the gym every day. Can you talk
Mhm.
a little bit about where the role of buildings is in solving the health issues of Canada?
I love that question, and thank you very much for asking. And I think it's a deep one. I think it's a very deep question that actually has a few layers in it that we kind of need to explore from a different angle. I think just based on the stat that you said, and I know we've said this like so many times at IWBI, that we spend 90% of our time indoors. I actually don't think it's an option anymore for you not to think that buildings are not the solution to resiliency and health and well-being. It is not a choice. It's just a matter of our evolution as human beings today in this day and age that we are spending that much time indoors. And I think we've come to a critical pivotal point or a transition where buildings need to become, places of resilience, places that take care of our health, and places that offer in one way, whether it's proactive or reactive or passive, to be the vehicles for health and well-being. Like I don't think it's a choice unless we're going to go back to being hunters and gatherers, where we're spending a significant amount of time outdoors versus indoors. I think this is the movement, and this is where we need to start to think how architecture, design, building, construction, all of those different things, policy and operational procedures actually create environments where we can thrive, right? Where we can see longevity. And there's so much innovation and so much technology that I'm seeing, being fortunate to be in the position that I am, meeting incredible people, organizations, startup companies that are actually really coming at this with that lens, right? So that I think is a very exciting thing to see, and how technology and innovation can actually help us be healthy, be resilient, be in a place where we can be living happy, healthy, and longer lives. And I do see that, and you see this around the world as well, as you're traveling and giving presentations and doing your research, that is just naturally where we need to go, because our healthcare system can only do so much. Doctors can only do so much. They play an incredibly important role, but in today's day and age, often it's a reactionary role to a health problem that already exists versus addressing the reasons for you getting sick or the reasons for your visit. Let's look at all the things that need to happen, right? Not to just put a band-aid solution, but what needs to happen in your lifestyle and the background, right? That needs to ensure that you're truly healing from all angles, right? Because often we know, unless it's an accident, that a lot of health issues are caused from that are stress related, right? That are impacted because of the different things, lifestyle, environments. We say always the postal code has a bigger impact on your genetics and your health outcomes than your actual, DNA or genetics that have been passed on from your family and ancestors. So I think it's a very important shift that we're seeing. And I think what I'm seeing is more developers, more designers, more architects are starting to think of how can we integrate these different passive ways to just create healthy environments that are going to help people thrive, that are going to help people live better, live longer, and actually be a lot more productive.
Mhm. So, the International Wellbeing Institute supports a movement and a campaign globally to make the places that we live, work, heal, and play healthier to help people live longer, better lives. The
Mhm.
lifespan of a building on average is 50 years, which requires a lot of investment. For many people, they may be developing that building, turning it over to other tenants. That may be a longer term hold in the market. And so, how do we build the bridge between the knowledge that you just shared around the importance of buildings for health and the business case around the person making the decision up front of how do we build better? How do we operate more efficiently? How do we use data to compel people to recognize that investing in buildings matter for health? So, Alessi, I'd love for you to share, in particular in the Canadian market, how do you build that bridge with some of the developers? They're coming to you to say, yes, health is important. I need to make very immediate decisions about how to design and operate a building today. So, how do we take some of that health data and put it into compelling business data and elevate our leaders in the market in Canada?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It's always a very, very difficult balance, I think, when let's just take a residential developer, right? Even commercial developers, but a little bit of a different lens in terms of just understanding how things worked in Canada, especially in Ontario, especially in the GTA, the Greater Toronto area. You know, we had a boom about 10 years ago. If you flew into Toronto, if you were flying over into the downtown airport or even to Pearson, we actually had, I think globally, it was, don't quote me exactly on it, but the highest or the most amount of cranes up because the development was booming. There was a demand, right? So the condo, the multifamily market was booming. We had a lot of developments, and that's because in general, Toronto is the hub, right, where most of the head offices are, HQs for a lot of organizations, not only Canadian organizations, but also global organizations. This is where most of the jobs are. It's an economic hub, right? So we saw this massive boom in real estate development. And essentially at that time, as a developer, you can build pretty much anything. If you build it, like they were just selling out, right? Like there wasn't a lot that you really had to do to differentiate because we did have a supply and demand issue. Now, 10 years fast forward and where things are today in terms of the economy and how things are going is a very different narrative. So before there wasn't really a need to show ROI, right? Or to be able to say to asset managers, like, yeah, building a healthy building is important because of sustainability, ESG, this is the right thing to do. No, I mean, from a developer standpoint, at the end of the day, they need to run a business, right? It's a numbers game. The asset managers are crunching the numbers. What makes sense? How can I get the largest dollar amount per square foot out of my building? That is primarily their business model, right? It's not necessarily always, not with all developers, but with most of them, at least in terms of the economy that we were seeing, it was just like produce, like we need output. The quicker we can build, the quicker we can sell for a higher price. That was the model. That's very, very different now. And so today, that is really where we're looking and seeing, developers shift a completely different perspective. Also, the consumer is asking, there's an affordability issue, but depends on where you are. Again, the things that we've talked about, like, hey, does this building provide good air quality? What are the amenities that are going to help me thrive in this building? If I'm working from home or I have a hybrid work environment, is this building and the amenities and all the things that are offered are going to contribute to my health and well-being? Those things are becoming very important. And we are now seeing a shift where developers are having a very hard time moving inventory. They're having a very hard time even starting projects because of costs, and a lot of different political and economic things that have happened. And now there is a shift on how do I differentiate myself? And a big differentiator is health and well-being. That is a big differentiator, right? And a marketing tool for them. And, in general, before, because every cent counts when you're a developer, the asset managers were coming to us and were saying, like, I need a business case for why this building should be built to the WELL standard, because I need to crunch those numbers to ensure that the investment that I'm making in WELL or in LEED or any other certification is going to give me some sort of benefit back, is going to help me sell more, or is going to help me get tenants in, whatever it is the case. So on the resi side, it's a little bit different, where on the corporate side, I mean, it was a no-brainer. Every large organization was looking for a Class A building to move into post-COVID or during COVID as they were renewing their leases, figuring out their strategies for back to work, back to office. And every new building that was Class A that was built to LEED and WELL, hands down, was getting leased out quicker for higher rates. Like it was just, that's your ROI case. And that's what we were seeing. And that's what we were hearing from our partners. And, the buildings that were really tough were the Class C and Ds. They were really competing with these new shiny buildings that were really putting health and well-being and sustainability at the forefront. And that's where everybody wants to be. So if you've been home for 2 years, that's a major change management, not change management. I want to say it's a complete lifestyle shift, right? So you're changing the mindset of somebody for 2 years who's working from home, and now you're expecting them to be back in the office. Well, you're not only competing with other office buildings and organization, you're actually competing with the home office, the comforts of the home office. And so really to entice people back, you really need to make sure that you're providing the type of environment that's going to help them thrive, that's going to help them operate, perform better, but also that there's a reason for you to be back in the office from a policy standpoint, right? Why do I need to be back in the office? Who else is going to be in the office at the same time? And so definitely on the corporate side in Canada, we saw that shift. Every new building, every new head office that's being built, pretty much is being built to WELL. And that ROI case is there because they're seeing it on the lease side of things for the tenants. The leases are taking up, instead of their projections where, it's going to take 12 to 18 months for us to lease out the space, it's like 6 to 8 months that they're seeing the lease, and they're getting premium lease rates, and they're signing long-term lease deals as well with the tenants. So I think there's that natural ROI case. And then given the research that you did and the research that we've done at IWBI, right, on investing in health, and that research coming forward and really being rooted in qualitative research to actually show that, yes, we already knew this, but now we have the numbers to back it up to really show why investing in health pays back. Like you can see that across the board financially, and then also from a performance standpoint also.
The WELL Building Standard has been the first certification system in the world focused on human health and well-being. And although there has been people that have tried to follow in our footsteps, at the end of the day, you don't want someone telling you the place is healthy. You want them proving that it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, Olesy, as the lead in Canada, you touch so many different people in this process,
Mm-hmm.
and that means that people have some hard questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, they have to make a compelling business case. They might need to learn everything around nourishment standards and ventilation requirements. They
Mm-hmm.
need to learn which consultant do they work with. And so, I want you to sort of talk through some of the hard questions that you're hearing in the market, and what's your response to sort of help people learn about some of these really important elements? And I'll start with one that you shared with me that just has to do with pricing. So we've talked today about the importance of the movement behind healthy buildings. We've
Mm-hmm.
talked about the challenges in the marketplace aligned with that and the compelling narrative that your clients are leading in Canada. And now let's get down to the nuts and bolts. So
Mm-hmm.
for those projects today, the consultants are trying to understand, how do I build a practice out of working with the WELL Building Standard? And we need our consultants around the world. In fact, it's a great thing that WELL does is we stand up secondary and tertiary markets of manufacturers and product developers and consultants, and we support design, architectural, and engineering firms. But they need to know how they work with us. So maybe we could do a little rapid round and hear from you. What are some of the big questions that you are getting in Canada that we can help to educate the market a little bit more on?
Yeah, no, great question. And I'm really glad you asked. And of course, right now, the questions have shifted in terms of what I'm hearing in the marketplace, just given the current economic and political instability and times that we're seeing, right? Just unfortunately, the tension that we have between Canada and the US right now, we've been incredible neighbors, incredible partners for many, many, many years and decades. And It's unfortunate what's unfolding right now, which is having a very, very big impact on Canada, economically, politically, culturally, many different things in terms of what we're dealing with right now. And so one of the things that, has in general been, this legacy of well being seen to be a little bit more pricey, being seen as, how do I really look at pricing? How do I incorporate the full pricing? I think when consultants come to me on how to best position well, or they're asking questions, I think what we have to remember as any organization, as any standard or any certification body, is that the end user or the client actually wants the full in price. They just don't only look at certification fees. Doesn't matter which certification you are, they're actually wanting the full price because the decision makers, the finance teams, the executives have to make budget decisions based on the full view, the 360 view. So what are the certification fees? What are the consulting fees? We're fortunate enough, we have an incredible network of well consultants around the world who help our clients achieve the well building standard. But then depends on which solution you're pursuing, depends on which rating, certification, or systems that you're looking at to use for your, for your project. There could be performance verification fees that may be involved in that. If it's a brand new building or you're doing a retrofit, they want to know, okay, what additional costs or CapEx do I need to look at in order to achieve the standard? So they're really trying to get a full picture and a full view. And often they have to go to different sources to be able to do that. So, well building standard, we can provide the certification fees, we can support in organizing a performance verification test as well, but then there's consulting fees, and then there's additional fees that we talked about in terms of the CapEx. So really, I think that could take some time. That could take some time for an organization to figure out what is that total budget is going to look like for me to do that project, and then where is the ROI. What I think we still have an opportunity in clarifying is often well is still seen just as a certification body. That legacy of it's just a certification and I'm pursuing a silver or gold, a platinum certification, and here are just the fees for that certification. And I think this is where, it's part of our job and it's part of my job in Canada as a Canada country lead to actually explain how the well ecosystem works. We have made some incredible strides and strategic moves to be able to offer a very holistic solution where you're able to pick and choose, and you're able to really cap your budget in terms of well spent. Our well at scale solution is a perfect example of how we can shift those perceptions of well being maybe a little bit more costly to actually being incredibly affordable and sometimes more competitive on pricing than other certification or products out there. So that was part of a strategic move that we've made to ensure that well was more accessible, well was more affordable, well was more streamlined, and it gave our clients a much broader way to engage with well and start on their well journey, to then be able to benchmark their scores, get the reporting that they need. And often what I do is, we have a great estimator tool. We have a well estimator tool online, which I'm not sure that a lot of people know about. You could actually put in your project scope, your project size, how many assets you have in your portfolio, and it's going to give you a comparison. It's often a lot more cost effective for you to go to well at scale, even if you're doing one project, because the certification fees, depending on your square footage, can range and be quite high because we're priced per square foot. To actually be able to make a larger commitment, be able to have more flexibility under well at scale. So I think there's still a lot of education, and that's what I'm working on with our consultants, with our well APs, on how to actually put forward the right pricing and the right solutions, again, based on our clients' needs. So I think that's a really big shift in terms of how we're supporting clients. We're no longer just a certification body. We're truly a global partner to our clients to achieve their objectives, their goals, their sustainability goals, in a very meaningful way.
And I think we're really honored to be one of the leading companies in the world on health. I asked myself, coming from the field and my background, PhD is in public health, and when we ask ourselves, who's the leading health company in Canada?
Mm-hmm.
Is it insurance? Is it
Mm-hmm.
pharmaceuticals?
Mm-hmm.
And aren't those really disease companies?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have a lot of pride in looking at health is we want to keep people healthy. We don't want to wait for you to need a drug or pill. We want to make it so that it's easier to be healthy. So we are a health partner for many of our clients. And I think that's a really important distinguishing mark is that although IWBI was the leader in a building standard, which is a single asset, single location, is that now we really have stepped up and into recognizing that clients want to work with us in an organizational level. So, why is that important? We've seen this in Canada. Actually, I was part of some early projects in Canada where we had clients pursuing well on one floor of a tower. And the people on the floor below said, wait a minute, I want to also be in a healthy building. We see it in healthcare settings where one side of the building pursues a renovation project to be healthy and the other side doesn't. And we see people literally migrate to the healthier part of the building. Like once we know how good it can be, we don't want to go back. And for many organizations, if they can't make the significant change overnight with one location, we are seeing them make these incremental changes. So if you're listening to this and about to purchase LED, lighting strategies across your office spaces, you need to call and talk to us. And that's free right now. You can actually look up our specification. But what we find for so many projects is that lighting doesn't just touch facilities. So we have an increased aging population in Canada in the workplace. We have increased cataract use. We have migraine sufferers and mental health issues. So now we have HR, talent management. Technology is a partner of ours as well. And so we at IWBI have stepped into being a global health company. And as such, we are partnering. And this really is our call, to action for many of those other partners out there that I know struggle and also trying to look at workplace wellness programs in HR or look at technology solutions. And we are finding that our biggest clients are saying, I don't want to work with 10 different groups. I want to align with one. So I think that's also a really compelling part of this narrative is that real estate, has stepped up and into being a health leader.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you bring up a very important point. And I think, again, it goes back to the legacy of well. And I am not sure that what percentage and how far reaching there's really an understanding about the different ways that you can get involved with well, right? Ratings and certifications are not the only way for you to get involved in well. There are so many ways that you can now really align with and partner with with our standards. So, and I think that is something that's very, very unique and very important for us to articulate to everybody that touches and works with our organization and works with well. So there is the standard that we started with, the International Well Building Standard, really, which is that evidence-based, strategy-based subset of solutions, right? And out of that came the certifications that we typically hear about when they think of well. And in the COVID crisis, we really pivoted in a really fast way to be able to come out with the well health safety rating. And a lot of organizations were already doing these things. They were already putting things in place to combat, the needs to create a healthy and safe space. But there was no third party verification and there was no standard that said, yes, you've done this, you've checked the list, right? So this is kind of what we've seen in the past 5 years, that shift from certification to ratings, which are a smaller subset of the standard. But what we also have to understand is there are other ways for you to get involved with well. We have membership. Membership is one of the fastest and most efficient ways to align to our well standard and to be able to get benefits today. You don't need to have a project, right? You don't need to have started something that's, longer term. You can actually become a member today and you can start to reap the benefits of well and say that your company is aligned to the well standard as you build out your well journey. Another incredible way as part of membership is our Works with Well program. You mentioned we are working with global providers, tech companies, we're working with manufacturers that have come to us and said, hey, we want to help our clients achieve the well building standard. They're coming to us and they're saying, does your product align to well? Does your product contribute to the well features and some of the well concepts? And it was really, we're product agnostic as well. But organizations were coming to us and asking, what are the products? Are there products out there? Are there solutions out there that already align that you have vetted? And, we didn't have that program in place, and we answered to the marketplace and we put a program in place that works with well, that is really a fast pass. It's a fast pass for specifiers, designers, well, APs and consultants to look in our directory online and say, these products have already met feature A, B, and C. So they have the confidence to go back to their clients and say, yes, this is a great product because it already aligns with well, and here are the features. And if we're going to implement it, you're already, on the way there. It's creating that pathway. It's removing those frictions. It's removing the time barriers that it takes to do the research. So, that's one way. You've got memberships, you've got Works with Well, and then we have sponsorship, right? We have incredible people. We have incredible speakers. We have incredible partners that want to be part of the well movement. We have incredible organizations, and you can become a sponsor again immediately without having to have a project today or doing something active today to be able to be part of well and align your organization with well. And so I think that's really the work that we've done over the 5 years to expand the many ways you can join well, you can start your well journey and be able to benefit today.
I love that, Alessi. I hope that someone is hearing this message that is both, looking at how to manage assets and design and develop a future of Toronto. But I also hope there's a student out there or a design professional or an advocate that's looking to transition their career and they recognize that where they spend time matters. And the one of the coolest parts of our job is that we get to work with people that are very passionate about creating better places for everyone. And the real answer is just step into the room, like be in the conversation, raise your hand. And, I think what you just covered, Alessi, was all these different ways to get involved. Like when I first started this work, I was fascinated in green buildings because there was no health standard. We had to develop a health standard.
Mm-hmm.
And, being in the room where it happens matters. Showing up and just saying you're interested. And I cannot tell you the stories over my 10 years, over 10 years at Well, of people that just came to the room.
Yeah.
They raised their hand, they stepped in, and they just said, my life's work is going to be about creating better, healthier places, whether I design it, whether I engineer it, whether I operate it, whether I fund it, whether I invest in it, or whether people like me who we study and speak about it. So we welcome you into this movement in Canada. So let's talk about
Yeah.
how people can join our community in Canada, whether that's virtually or in person. And
Mm-hmm.
so I want to talk a little about how they can do that. So this May, we held the third Well Summit in Toronto, Canada, and it was packed. The energy in that room was incredible, even though, of course, it was raining and I think even snowing outside in May in Toronto. But I think the energy and the impact of the people in that room was felt very clearly. And also, Alessi, we have hosted the first Changemakers Roundtable with Lutron Experience Center in Toronto this May, and we'll be continuing that work forward. And that will be an opportunity to invite other leaders into that space to meet you, to engage with other like-minded individuals, and honestly, get lifted up. I think it's really important we don't talk enough about that so many of the people that we work with, it's not just what they do, but it's who they are. And it's really important that we create the spaces for them to do that. So, Alessi, I'd love for you to speak a little bit about how people can connect directly with you and our community in Canada.
Yeah, thank you. I want to take a little bit of a different approach in terms of how I answer that question. Because as I think of my role more and more, and as I interact with more clients, with more of our well community in Canada, I actually want to say, like, and what I'm realizing is I'm really here to serve. And that's really my role, is really to serve our community, to be of help, to be the go-to person, right? That where you need a question answered, you know that I'm there and I'm reachable. I'm the type of person where you can email me, you can pick up the phone and call me. And I truly care about our clients in Canada because it's very important for me to see our projects come to fruition, our projects come to completion in Canada so we can celebrate. We can celebrate all the amazing things that we're doing. I think what really differentiates well is it's a very tangible and it's a very grounded certification, like you mentioned. If you have a building that is doing an addition, right, to the existing building, and they're building that to the well building standard, like you mentioned, or it's a retrofit, it is something that is felt immediately. And I think that is something that I've been so grateful to experience going into our projects in Canada, going into these spaces, because it's an immediate shift. Like people feel the standard. It's not something that's high up in the sky. It's not something theoretical. It's not something academic. You actually feel completely different walking into a well-certified building. And I guarantee my career on that. If you go into any one of our clients in Canada, into any one of the buildings, and we've done tours, and that's part of the summit, because for me, it's not about us talking about it. I want our clients to actually talk about their success stories. I
Mhm.
want our clients to showcase their projects. I want them to talk about how they're seeing well impacting the people inside their buildings, their employees, their customers that they're welcoming. And I think that's what's really exciting. So yes, on an annual basis, we hold our Well Toronto Summit, and we're going to continue to do that. And that's really a showcase of all the good things that are happening in Canada, all the incredible projects. We partner and do tours. So I invite people to come out to the summits. That is your connection to the clients, to the community, and actually witness and really experience what it is to be in a well building through the tours. We have partnerships like Lutron, which I'm super excited to talk about and announce that, in the showroom in Toronto, we're going to be doing a, seasonal quarterly series with Lutron. And we're going to be talking about very important topics. We have one coming up in October where we're going to be talking about daylight savings and the impact
Mm.
of, the daylight savings and us going into our winter blues in Canada, and what are some tools and how you can combat that and stay healthy throughout the winter blues, right? So those partnerships are really important. It's really important for me to host our summits in spaces that are well certified or well rated, to really be able to showcase and for people to experience that, right? And another thing is, again, I'm going to be partnering to have more well AP trainings and more well AP get-togethers in Toronto, because I think that's very important to bring our community together and for us to continue to share. And just really partnering with different partners of ours to do activation events. And that's what I'm planning for the remainder of the year in 2026. And that's really exciting.
And I want to be at as many of those as I can because I always enjoy coming to visit you in Canada.